I think it's fair to say that the past year has been a pretty overwhelming year in politics. 2020 was full of so many events, like the first impeachment of former President Donald Trump and the election.
Even though we are only 2 months in, 2021 has also been a very politically heavy year. From the riot at the Capitol building, to the inauguration of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, to the second impeachment of Donald Trump, it just seems like there's always something large and life changing going on in politics.
Because of the frequency and importance of many of these political events, discussing them has become unavoidable. We have noticed conversation about events like the election or the Capitol riot pop up in some of our classes in the past few months, and it has raised some questions about the placement of political discussions in the classroom.
So today, we try to answer the question, should we talk about politics or political events in the classroom? And if we should, how do we go about handling those conversations?
My name's Nicole,
And I'm Elena.
and welcome to this episode of Planet Politics with Elena and Nicole.
When we first started reporting on this issue, we immediately reached out to students to ask if they had talked about politics or political events in the classroom and how that made them feel.
We conducted an anonymous survey of 100 Cooper City High School students to gauge their opinions on discussing political events in the classroom. Of those 100 students, 85 of them said they had discussed a political or social event in the classroom this school year.
According to our data, most of these conversations took place in social science courses or social studies electives like AP US History, ACE European History, ACE Sociology, or Government. But these conversations weren't only restricted to these social studies courses. They also happened in classes like Adulting 101, English, and even chorus.
We asked each of the students to rate their experience on a scale from 1 to 5, ranging from very positive to very negative. Most students said their experience was either 1, very positive, or 3, neither positive nor negative. That being said, there were 17 students that reported their experience was somewhat negative or very negative.
The most interesting parts of our data, however, were the free response answers that we got. We asked each student to elaborate on their experience discussing political events in the classroom and then answer the question, what, if anything, would you change about that experience? We also left them an empty box for anything else they might want to say.
Elena and I spent a lot of time discussing these answers, but we also decided to discuss them with the people who started these conversations in the first place, their teachers.
I think there is room for politics in the classroom if managed well and guided well.
This is Peggy Wilfong. She teaches a variety of social studies classes at CCHS, particularly for the ACE program.
I think the teacher needs to really think about their audience and their student base and make the right choice for them, but always keep their personal opinions out of it. They should never, ever speak to their preferences, their political preferences, who they voted for, where they stand. Information should be presented objectively and discussed as objectively as possible.
We got a lot of responses from students about teacher bias in their conversations, like Ms. Wilfong is addressing. For instance, here's a response that we got from an 11th grade student. We were addressing both the Capitol riot and the election voting fraud, but the teacher was incredibly biased, skewed left while discussing it, so it was more of them sharing their own opinions about the events rather than having the topic open for discussion.
All of the teachers we interviewed agreed that teacher bias has no place in these discussions. With that being said, here's social studies teacher Michael Jones.
Although sometimes I will tell you as a teacher it's hard, because we ourselves have political leanings, but I can't put that out there because if it runs counter to somebody else in the class, then they may feel like somehow I'm validating one side while making somebody else's opinion more invalid.
Like Mr. Jones said, bias can make students feel uncomfortable, invalidated, or even unsafe. Safety and feeling safe was another common topic in our student responses. Here's a response from a 12th grader. Safety in the classroom is taken for granted sometimes. Within these conversations, one particular student spewed some pretty xenophobic and anti-Semitic stuff, and I did not feel comfortable.
All the teachers we talked to wanted to create a safe space and open place in the classroom for civil discourses about politics, where students' opinions can be heard and valued with literal conflict. Barbara Sickler, a language arts teacher at Cooper City High School, wanted to create not only a safe space, but a brave space for her students as well.
There's a lot of talk in colleges about a safe space, which I think a classroom should. Students should know that their voice is important and respected, But that's also sort of a misnomer because there is no real safe space. So I like to combine the idea of a brave space as well, so that you do need to be able to express yourself and support your opinion, and still know that the teacher and your colleagues are going to listen civilly, and everyone's voice needs to be heard.
Students were also concerned about civil conversations. Many students articulated their desire for these sorts of conversations to be civil and free of conflict. They wanted their peers and teachers to be understanding of all viewpoints instead of just arguing with each other. When asked what they would change about the discussion, one 12th grader said, "I would have made it more civil if I could and made sure that the students on both sides were listening to each other's points and then argued theirs respectfully."
The teachers we interviewed all stressed the importance of civil discussion. Here's Mr. Jones on how he establishes civil discourse in his classroom.
My only rules for conversation about political topics or things that might be more sensitive is that while you may have your own opinion, you still have to make sure that you're being civil about the conversation. So we talk about civil discourse and what it actually means if you disagree with somebody in order to make a point. And for an AP class, it's all about your rhetoric, but also it's about your evidence. So you can say whatever you'd like, but if you have no evidence to back it up, it's not going to be as credible as someone who, has something definitive that they can use.
At the end of our survey and our interviews, most of the people we talked to or gathered data from said that talking about politics in the classroom is important. 86 of the 100 students we surveyed said, yeah, talking about politics and political events in the classroom is important and appropriate, while 14 disagreed.
All the teachers we talked to also said that discussing these events in the classroom, as long as they are important and relevant, is appropriate. Here's Ms. Wilfong again on why discussing these events is so crucial.
Things that happen in the world, especially in our own country, are relevant many times to what we're teaching. And the ability to make those connections really sets a student apart. And when conversations like that can take place in the classroom, it can be very, very eye-opening and very healthy.
Well, we've heard from students, we've heard from teachers, and I guess that means it's time for us to, answer the question. So, Nikki, should we talk about politics and political events in the classroom? Is that appropriate?
100%. It's unavoidable. There really is no other option. You can't be a teen in America. You can't be a teen in Broward County, Florida, one of the most politically divisive counties in the country, a county that every presidential election looks after and seeks after to hopefully gain under their control. And we can't not talk about it. There are too many important topics that affect us soon being young voters, to not talk about it.
I mean, I definitely agree. I think that it's more important that we have a safe space to discuss this kind of stuff than it is being a little uncomfortable discussing it. I just think that when we're talking about how we should go about having these conversations is a bit more nuanced. I mean, based on what we heard from students and teachers, I think that, being unbiased and really knowing the group of kids you're about to go into this conversation with is the best you can do. There's not really a one-size-fits-all way to discuss politics, which is unfortunate, but it's what's true.
When I was talking to Ms. Wilfong, she was telling me that she definitely had to gauge what she knew about her students and how passionate and fired up she knew that certain students could get. And the ones that would get more passionate and fired up, this could have been a back burner question, or not. She wouldn't have conduced as much time to it or dedicated as much time of the class period to it. Whereas if students, wanted to be educated and stuff like that, she would have allotted more time and known that these students wouldn't necessarily cause as much of a stir as other students. So she definitely had to do that and consider that. And I'm sure all teachers have to consider that, consider the maturity levels. You're not going to talk about politics with fourth graders and expect them to understand it.
Yeah. I guess at the end of the day, we both agree that these are important conversations to have because we need to know and discuss what's going on. And as for how to do it, it's up to the discretion of the teacher because, I mean, it'll depend on each group of students. But, being unbiased and really focusing on having civil discourse is the best way to go about it.
Yeah, definitely. You're going to have to start somewhere. And this, the closest way to do this is in a closed environment where everyone's feelings are respected and valued and no one's attacked. So wholeheartedly agree.
That about wraps up this episode of Planet Politics. See you next time.